Hi, advocates. It's Charlie here from People for the American Way. Thanks so much for joining us today to take action to urge your senator to protect our courts and protect our care. This video training will have 3 parts. First, a PFAW ad about your senator and judges that threaten our care. Second, an interview with PFAW experts about the courts. And third, a brief explanation of the toolkit we sent you with ways to take action on this issue from home. Thanks for joining us, and without further ado, your ad.
Cory Gardner and Donald Trump are trying to destroy our health care. And Gardner is confirming extreme judicial nominees with the power to make that happen. Nominees who fought against protections for people with pre-existing conditions, argued that Americans have no right to health care, and tried to make it harder for people to obtain birth control and other basic reproductive care. Now those people are judges, and their bad decisions are stacking up. They're voting to strip protections for pre-existing conditions, ruling to slash funding for reproductive care, even trying to deny disability benefits to cancer patients. Bad judges make the rulings, but Cory Gardner is just as responsible as they are. Tell Cory Gardner, stop destroying our health care. Stop confirming Trump judges.
Hi, everyone. Hi, PFAW members. Thank you for joining us for the Vote the Courts Action Toolkit. Excited to have a number of our experts here to talk about why voting the courts, and specifically voting the courts on healthcare, is an important issue. So, Marge, can you kick us off and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Marge Baker. I'm the Executive Vice President for Policy and Program at People for the American Way. I've been here 17 years and working on courts just about the whole time.
And what makes voting the courts an important issue?
Courts are essential. Fair courts are absolutely essential. Fair-minded jurists are essential to everything that matters in our daily lives, from our health to our ability to vote, to the air we breathe, to the water we drink, to our rights as workers, to be free from discrimination. Just everything we care about in our daily lives goes back to having fair-minded judges on the courts.
Great. Thanks, Marge. Diallo?
Yes, I'm Diallo Brooks. I am the Senior Director of Outreach and Public Engagement for People for the American Way. I've been here for 10 years. And to answer the same question that Marge just answered, the courts are important to every facet of our lives. We need to make sure that, and it's also one of the pillars of our democracy. And so we can't allow the courts to be an institution of our government that we pay no attention to, and we don't do what's necessary to have the right people on those courts. And like Marge said, having fair-minded jurists that are able to protect the rights that so many of us have worked so hard for years is of paramount importance.
Great. Thanks, Diallo. And Paul?
Hi, I'm Paul Gordon. I'm Senior Legislative Counsel. Courts have always been really important to me. When I was growing up, we had a Supreme Court that was known for being really progressive. I was not alive during Brown v. Board of Education, but that was the Supreme Court. It was a place that you went to make sure that like equal protection actually meant equal protection, that justice actually meant justice, that fairness actually meant fairness. And it was really inspiring. And then it's not like that anymore. This should be the place that I turn to when there's some injustice. And now it isn't. And I want to go back to the way it was before.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, y'all. All right, let's get started with these few questions. Maybe Marge, can you give us a brief overview of how we've gotten to this political moment? Aren't the courts supposed to be nonpartisan?
So the courts are supposed to be nonpartisan. Really, the courts are about having people on the courts, judges and justices who will administer justice. What we've seen, though, is a 40-year campaign by the far right, by the ultra-conservative factions that have worked hard to hack the courts with judges who aren't fair-minded, with judges who will help advance their agenda, which is about putting the powerful, the wealthy, the privileged, the rights of those groups above all of us. And so we've witnessed this 40-year campaign that got us from what Paul was talking about, which is a court which was basically protected justice, protected fairness, protected our rights, to courts that are really now, especially in the Trump era, being populated with judges and justices who are not fair-minded and who are working to advance an agenda that really undermines the rights, the privileges, the things that all of us as Americans truly value.
Great, thanks, Marge. Paul, I'm wondering if you can give a little more color to that, specifically talking about the issue of healthcare.
Yeah, I mean, you remember what a fight it was getting the Affordable Care Act through Congress. It is not easy to have the federal government do what needs to be done for healthcare because there's so much resistance to it. And one of the places we see resistance to that is through the courts. This movement that Marge was talking about, the conservative movement, to put judges on the courts who have this view of the Constitution that Congress really does not have the authority to do X, Y, or Z, among other things. So we had this enormous campaign to say the Affordable Care Act was unconstitutional, which when they first started making the argument, people were laughing like, that's ridiculous. And then it just caught on with these right wingers and you ended up with a 5-4 decision. We almost lost the Affordable Care Act. You know, that's pre-existing conditions, protections for pre-existing conditions. I have that, you have that because of the Affordable Care Act. And I don't want judges intentionally misreading the law to destroy all the work that has gone into creating our healthcare. You know, our healthcare needs improvement. Let me say, I mean, definitely. But the progress we've made, I want to keep that progress.
And the one thing in addition is we saw that what the Republicans in control of Congress tried to do was to overturn the Affordable Care Act. They tried to repeal the Affordable Care Act and they could not do it. So now what they're doing is trying to use the courts to do what they couldn't do legislatively. And that's another important trend that we are seeing, where they can't do something legislatively. They can't rewrite the Voting Rights Act. They wouldn't have the majorities to do that. So they use the courts to overturn key provisions of the Voting Rights Act.
Absolutely. Thanks, Shal. Diallo, do you have anything to add? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's important to realize, especially, I mean, I think right now, given the pandemic that we're engaged in and seeing how important access to healthcare is to so many communities, so many marginalized communities. And so we need a court that's able to stand up to the partisan antics of this administration, of the Republican Congress, to do the right thing and make sure that the American people are protected and have the systems that they need in order to be healthy communities. And so we don't need the courts just to be walking in lockstep with this president because of partisan reasons. We need them to be doing the right thing. And like Marge and Paul said, protecting the things that we have fought so long and so hard for, to make sure that the American people have what they need to be healthy.
And if I could just add something to that, you know, things that are really basic to our society, like Medicare and Medicaid, it's important that Congress have the authority to have programs like that, and that we don't have some throwback constitutional interpretation that says this is not a mission that Congress should be doing. And individuals, a lot of times, like an individual will get screwed by their insurance company or by their employer and miss out really important access to healthcare that they have a legal right to. And it is important to have judges who will recognize that and let them vindicate their rights. So we've got the big picture, enormous programs, but we also have the cases that you never hear about, but which are the most important things in the world to the parties who are involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think going a little bit along those lines, can you speak a little bit more about the role of the court in protecting reproductive care, care for gender affirming care, care for specifically supporting people who have specific needs and come from marginalized communities?
Yeah, you know, for example, there's a case, there's an issue that has been coming up more and more often in the courts about transgender people who are incarcerated, and part of the medical treatment that they need is the gender, I'm blanking on the term, operation.
Gender care?
What?
Are you talking about gender affirming care?
Thank you. Is gender affirming care. And sometimes the people who run the prisons will give that, and sometimes they won't. And it's really cruel and sick not to give that kind of care. And so sometimes the people who are not getting this care go to court and they say, this is cruel and unusual punishment, because it is. It's important that the judges recognize that. And a lot of these judges that are put on the bench by Trump, they just don't see it. They don't see it.
Well, and more than not seeing it, I mean, we have judges who refuse, from the bench, refuse to use litigants' preferred pronouns.
Oh, yeah.
So refuse to acknowledge who those litigants are. So how could that litigant possibly believe that they're going to get justice, they're going to get fairness from this judge? So, and over and over again, you mentioned choice. You have judges who have already said, they're on record saying that Roe v. Wade should be overturned, that it's blasphemy, that it's horrendous, that it's, you know, an abomination. How can anyone who's fighting for their ability to get reproductive care from a facility feel that they're going to get fair treatment from a judge who holds those beliefs, and who's demonstrated an inability to put those beliefs aside? That's kind of what that's sort of the big thing we are fighting for is, you know, a litigant may not always win their case, but they're entitled to justice, they're entitled to fairness, they're entitled to being heard. And what we have particularly from this set of judges that we're seeing Trump administration put forward and the Republicans railroad through, you don't have fair-minded, you do not have fair-minded judges. You don't have judges who you have judges who are coming in with a preordained agenda that they're trying to accomplish through their position on the courts.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the big things too, I mean, if you look at each of those issues that you all raised, I think it's important, like, it really gets to the core of what Marge and Paul are saying, is that based on the Constitution, people expect to be able to come into court and have, one, that Constitution protect them, and also making sure that those jurists that are making decisions about their lives leave their biases at the door. But oftentimes what we're seeing is that these jurists are bringing in their biases into the courtroom, their own personal biases. They're not, you know, basing those decisions purely on legal doctrine, but really looking for ways to move their ideological agenda. And that's the scary thing for the American people, because we expect the courts to be this fair place where people can receive justice if justice is due to them. But at the same time, you know, like Marge said, they might not win every situation, every case, but people should have an expectation that the courts from top to bottom on the federal level will exercise that. And, you know, we see that in the way that the courts have made decisions recently, that they're using ideological tactics in order to make their decisions instead of really like looking at the merits of a particular case.
Right.
Great, thanks so much. So we just got a great overview of the ways and different issues at hand here. Do you see any particular things on the horizon? Are there any particular judges that are coming up for confirmation that are a particular threat? Are there cases to look out for? What can people stay tuned for?
So in terms of judges, I think the two that we're focusing on right now that are truly concerning are two Circuit Court of Appeals judges. And let me clarify, the federal court system has 3 levels. So there's a district courts, which are the trial courts, the Court of Appeals, which are the appellate courts, and then there's the Supreme Court. And again, just maybe to give a little bit of perspective, to understand the importance of these lower courts, the Supreme Court considers maybe about 100 cases a year. The courts of appeals at the next level consider about 35,000 cases. So that means in those 34,900 cases, those courts of appeals are the courts of last resort. They make the final decisions. And then at the trial level, the district courts hear about 350,000 cases. So these are lower level judges, but their decision is essentially the final word in a huge number of hundreds of thousands of cases. So we're focusing in particular on two truly troubling circuit court judges. One is Corey Wilson, who's been nominated to a seat on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Fifth Circuit is like a legendary circuit for making sure that people's civil rights are protected. And we now have somebody nominated that court who has an abominable record on voting rights, who is hostile to health care. He had I can't remember the specific names. Paul may remember, but the terminology he used for the Affordable Care Act was. Do you remember, Paul? God,
it was an abomination. Was it
something like that? Anyway, so that's Court for the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, and then for the D.C. Circuit, we have Justin Walker, who is a crony of Mitch McConnell, and who also clerked for Justice Kavanaugh, who was actually one of Kavanaugh's big defenders and made sure that everybody knew that Kavanaugh would not support the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act, in case anybody was wondering whether he was conservative enough. So he kind of credentialed him to make sure everybody would get behind him. And Justin Walker, has a really bad record on the Affordable Care Act as well, on health care as well. And these are two nominees these are nominations that happen, they're coming up, they were made in the midst of this crisis we're in, this huge, the coronavirus pandemic. And, Mitch McConnell is planning to move them forward no matter what. And so we have to be on the lookout, because we don't need more judges at that level, the Fifth Circuit and the DC Circuit Court of Appeals, who are hostile to voting rights, hostile to health care, and who just don't appreciate the role the courts should be playing in people's daily lives. The Fifth Circuit states are Mississippi, Texas, and Louisiana.
Great.
Yay. The words that Corey Wilson used to describe the Affordable Care Act were perverse and illegitimate. Really? Perverse and illegitimate. Ooh.
Goodness.
And Paul, what about some of the cases before the court right now?
Well, one of the humongous cases that's before the court right now is on the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act. Again, there's when the Republicans, they reduced the tax penalty for having health care to zero. And the Republicans came up with this bizarre legal theory saying, well, now that means that there's no constitutional authority for the law, so the entire law needs to be scrapped. It's really lame. When the Trump Justice Department made that argument in court, the Justice Department officials refused to sign the brief. One of them even quit. They had to get a political appointee to sign it. His name is Chad Riedler, and he got rewarded by getting a seat on one of the circuit courts of appeal. Another one of Trump's judges, Kurt Engelhardt, in the Fifth Circuit, he wrote an opinion actually with this crazy legal theory saying the requirement to have to protect pre-existing conditions is unconstitutional. That is going to be heard by the Supreme Court. I think it was supposed to be this term, and then because of the pandemic and the delays in a lot of cases that is causing, that will probably be delayed. So we won't be having that decision by the end of June. This should be a 9-0 case. And it's scary that we don't even know for certain that that's going to be the case. That's how bad it's gotten.
Another case that actually the court is going to hear by virtual argument coming up is the access of congressional committees and the Manhattan DA to Trump's financial records. There's a big case that's worked its way all the way up to the Supreme Court, in terms of the ability of Congress and the district attorney to access those records. So that's another one that we're watching.
And for access to abortion care, the Supreme Court, like I think it was 2015, decided a case where they struck down the Texas's trap law. Said this is bullshit. They didn't use that word, but it's bullshit and unconstitutional. Louisiana had the exact same law, and Trump judges said, "Oh no, this is different. It's constitutional." And now the Supreme Court is going to hear that. For the justices on the Supreme Court, when they said they wanted to hear the case, they already made it clear. Or I think it was when they put a hold on enforcing the Fifth Circuit opinion. They already made it clear that they think the Louisiana law is perfectly fine. And it's not. It's this exact same law that we had struck down in Texas. But they're so set on eliminating the right to abortion and women's access to abortion that we're going to see the same law basically before the court again.
Paul, can you explain what that law is? You said a trap law, but I'm not quite a lawyer. I don't know.
Trap is targeted regulation of abortion providers. So TRAP, T-R-A-P. So these are the laws where the anti-abortion legislators pretend that their concern is the health and the safety of the women who are getting abortions. And they come up with these crazy medical requirements that are completely unnecessary, but really which are designed so that the clinics can't meet them and they end up closing. So trap laws.
And these are provisions like requiring that the clinic be within a certain distance of a hospital, that the doctor performing the services at the clinic have admission privileges at those hospitals. Even though, for example, most of the abortions are medication abortions, and there's no hospitalization at all ever required. So there are provisions that are designed to make it harder for a clinic to provide the services that it needs to provide.
So Charlie, this is where the rubber hits the road for folks that maybe want to know like what they can do about this. We have to remember, like it's basic civics. We got to go back to basic civics. That yes, this president appoints the people that he wants to put onto the federal court, but it is the United States Senate who actually confirms those folks. And it is their job to vet these people, to make sure that they are meeting constitutional standards. And we see that in a lot of cases that our senators are not doing their job, Republican senators are not doing their job in making sure that they're holding accountable those folks that are going to be sitting on the court, or holding accountable to this president for who he actually appoints to sit on the court. They are voting in lockstep with this president for some of the most conservative, some of the folks that are so far out of kind of this judicial kind of norm that we see. And so if people really want to take action, they need to be calling their senators and asking them, particularly the ones that have, and specifically the ones that have voted for Trump judges, and asking them, one, why do they want to vote for folks that are going to take away my health care? Why are they voting for folks that are undermining my civil rights? Why are they voting for folks that are undermining the protections that I want to have while I work? And in these extreme times that we're in right now, folks can actually really see where the rubber hits the road. I mean, we look at the Wisconsin election, the Supreme Court made a decision about forcing folks to go to have that election take place at that particular time. And there were smarter ways to do that. But this court moved in a very conservative direction. And so people need to call those senators and say, why are you supporting judges that do this to us? And hold them accountable, because like all of these issues, no matter whether it's healthcare or anything else, these are the folks that are making the decision and saying, hey, we want to allow this person is undermining all the rights that you should have as a citizen, as a participant in this democracy. undermining all of your rights. And you're allowing them to sit on our federal courts, which are lifetime appointments.
Definitely. And thanks so much for bringing that up, Diallo. Folks are on the phone to learn about how they can take action and how they can vote the courts and how they can encourage other people to vote the courts. So as this series continues, they will have videos to come, actually in a couple minutes, about how to take action. But as we wrap up, are there any additional things that our advocates should know before they're getting ready to gear up and take action?
I think the important thing is to understand that there is a growing public awareness about the importance of the courts that we're seeing. I've been doing this for a number of years, and I'm seeing a sea change in people's, everyday Americans' awareness of the role the court plays in their lives. I think there's things that have happened all along, from some really, really bad decisions like the Citizens United decision, or the on money in politics, or the Shelby County decision on the Voting Rights Act, and the real threat that people feel to the continuance of Roe v. Wade. Just a whole set of things happening. So there's greater awareness of the role that these courts play in their lives. And now, of course, the concerns about the Affordable Care Act's ability to survive. So this is not a time to step up. And I think it will be like pushing against an open door. I mean, I think people are just ready to take action on this and ready to find something that they can do about it. And as Diallo mentioned, I mean, this is an election issue. It's not just, it's about who's going to nominate, so who's going to be president. It's also about who's going to confirm, so who's going to sit in the Senate. And we're on the cusp of some real victory here. So I think that's important for people to sort of take with them. The wind is at our back on this.
And if I could add something to that, you know, a lot of these senators have town hall meetings. Go to a town hall meeting, bring up this issue. Ask your senator, why are you voting for these people? Hold them accountable.
And if it's a virtual town hall meeting, you can raise it virtually.
Yep.
Yeah, and my last word on it too is that, you know, for us as, you know, being civically active and civically engaged in this country, we can't sit on the sidelines as it relates to the courts. The courts, you know, you look at you have the legislative branch, you have the executive branch, and you have the judicial branch. Oftentimes we spend so much energy on two of the branches and not focusing on that third branch, which has equal importance. And so, as folks like Marge said, folks are waking up around this and seeing how it impacts their lives every day. And we need to be having that as a part of our conversation, no matter what issues we're working on. We cannot leave the courts out of the occasion. We have to hold accountable senators that do the wrong thing as it relates to the court. And when they do the wrong things, we need to make sure that they're replaced with folks that are going to do the right thing. We have a tremendous amount of opportunity if we organize, bring in unusual partners in this conversation, and do the work necessary to move on this. We can create real change.
Great. Thanks, everybody. And everyone else, stay tuned for the next steps.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, advocates. Hope you enjoyed the interview with Marge, Paul, and Diallo. And we hope you're ready to take action. So please pull up the toolkit we sent you. It should be in your inbox. To get started, you'll need something to write with, paper, your computer, and maybe a few friends. If you have a printer, that's awesome. Please print out the postcard on page 3 of this toolkit. If you don't, that's okay too. You can write a letter the old-fashioned style. You just won't have the cool graphic that we made for that postcard. Let's dig in. So on page 1, you kind of get an introduction to us. If you're a veteran PFAW member, thank you so much for sticking with us. Your support matters more than anything. If you're new here, we're excited to have you. This work takes everyone, and more the merrier. Welcome. So on page 2, we have some talking points which can help guide some of your advocacy. We outline some core argument pieces that can be used to draft social media posts, to draft letters to the editor, to talk to the senator on the phone, to create questions for virtual town halls. All of the things that you need an argument for. So all of these things are also strengthened by you adding your personal stories. Why does the Affordable Care Act matter to you? What do you think about the need to access safe and affirming care? What sort of things motivate you to care about this issue? All of that makes your argument all that much stronger, and it makes your advocacy personal and unique. So dig into that stuff in addition to taking our talking points and adapting them for whatever needs that you have. On page 3, we have the postcard we already talked about. You can cut up the edges, the dashed edges, and then fold it in the center, and then do a little glue or a little sticker or a little tape, anything to make the two sides stick, and then put a stamp on it and write a letter to your senator. If you don't have a printer, that's okay. You can do it the old-fashioned way, and we already looked up your senator's address. So take a look at that, fill it out. Great resource to just get started. And as soon as you fill out that postcard, take a selfie and tag People for the American Way. Let us know how you're doing. Let us know that you sent a postcard. On the 4th page, we have a toolkit for how to write a letter to the editor. Letter to the editors are an important way to, wrong way. Letters to the editor are an important way for folks to be able to continue to keep this issue at the forefront, keep this issue in a local paper. And there are some really great tips about length, about pitching, and about how to connect your letter to the editor to a current issue and increase the chance that your letter to the editor gets picked up. So take a look at that. And it also just has some great writing tips in it as well. On the 5th page, you'll see some digital tools. That includes a way to text in a number and get connected to your senator. And it includes social media ideas, it includes hashtags, it includes all the things that you would expect digital stuff to include. But it's certainly not an exhaustive list of resources for how to use digital to advocate for our courts and for our healthcare in this time. Just a few ideas to get you started. Please write us and let us know if there are more ideas that you come up with that you think are a great idea and that we should share with everyone. On the 6th page, we go over a little bit of virtual events. So virtual events, technically we're doing a virtual event right now. You signed up for a shift and we are having a training on how to be an advocate to vote the courts, specifically on the issue of healthcare. But there are so many virtual events happening right now, especially this time, especially as we're all learning to adjust to the new reality of being at home during the coronavirus, and also as we're learning more and more about digital organizing. So offer some ways to find other virtual events, to get connected to other folks. And I think the coolest part is that there's a brief list of things to think about when you're hosting your own virtual event. We hope that you go out and you spread the word about taking action on this issue, about the importance of the courts to affirming our right to have health care, and the importance of taking action. Ultimately, this issue is so important, and we all need to make our voices heard about it. We need to hold our senators accountable for the votes that they take and on confirming judges. So thanks so much for joining us today, and I really hope that you take a look at everything in that toolkit. And please write us if you have any questions, comments, and concerns. Please tag People for the American Way in your social media posts. We'd love to see them. We'd love to help lift them. And be well.